Hi all, I want to show you how I sew together my fancy granny squares. This is the back, this is the front. So let's go ahead and finish this corner. I'm going to start down here and go along and up. And I'm trying to match my edges here. So they're kind of turned this way. See how you don't see the tops of the stitches as easily. This is the back, this is the front. So I'm going to put my front sides together, or right sides together, and I'm going to start on this side. I cut a length of yarn that is twice my arm length. I don't like to go any further than that because it's really hard to, pull yarn through that's longer than your arms. It gets tangled, and even at this length it's going to be a little difficult. And this is from the center of a new skein of yarn, so it's a little wrinkly when it's in the middle. They're kind of tightly. Okay, so let's find our corner where the V-stitch is. I'm going to go backwards through the stitch using my needle backwards, because even though it's a tapestry needle, it's still a little pointy, and here it's more rounded. Now I'm going to go into the stitch that's like there's two floating chain stitches. I'm going to go into the floating chain stitch closest to the piece that I'm attaching it to, and not the floating chain stitch that's pointing away. And I'm just going to leave a tail. I'll weave that in later. And I went from the inside out, and so this one I'll do the same stitch, the floating chain stitch, in that 2 chain space closest to and I go from the inside out. But I'm not going under both loops. I'm going under the outside loop. So from the inside out, only the outside loop. Inside out, outside loop. So this would be both. And this is the outside loop. It's actually very easy to do this because you have to dig down and turn the work to get to that inside loop. So it's actually much easier to do it this way. Because the outside loop is the one that's sticking up more. It's kind of on edge. Now this fancy granny has kind of a dip here, but when we stitch it together, it kind of evens out. So because this is going to be a garment, I wanted as invisible and flat a seam as possible. There are other ways of joining granny squares. I find this is the best when it comes to garments. See how flat that is? And I'm going backwards with my needle so that I don't split my yarn and, you know, sew through the yarn. I just want to actually go into the stitch itself. Okay, so here we are at the V stitches, our corners. And we didn't really cover the corners down here too much at all, actually. This one didn't get covered. This one didn't get covered. This one did. This one got covered. So I'm going to have to stitch down into these two and then back up so that this hole is covered. So I have to be careful. So here's the back of the V stitch, and then here's the top of this V stitch. Now V stitch is 4 stitches, the 2 posts and then the 2 floating stitches, the chain stitches. Okay, so let's do a V stitch, one of the chain stitches. On this one. Now I want to do this one, and I want to do the back. Okay. And then this one, also I want to do the back. This is the other floating chain stitch. I'm going to do the other floating chain stitch on this one, and then I'm going to do the other floating chain stitch on this one. Okay, so let's go ahead and work on this. As you can tell, I did not block my grannies. I just figured I would stitch for stitch bring them together. Here's the back of this square in that floating chain stitch. Now we're at the top of this post, and we should be at the top of this post as well. So now it's just 1-to-1 all the way across from the inside out, outside half of the stitch. And sometimes I mess up and I put my stitches in sometimes twice, into the same stitch. I don't think it's a game over move. Sometimes you lose track of where you are. Just do your best. One thing I like about the little dip in the middle is that it helps me remember where I am. Like, it's like if they line up pretty close in the middle, then I know I'm doing okay. So here's a good place to take a look at. Do you see this knot right here? This is where I ended the granny square and I wove in that end. But there's that little slip stitch that I kind of used to knot. Go ahead and go into the stitch before it. And then you can go into the stitch after it, or you can go underneath the whole thing. But I like to go into the stitch before it and the stitch after it. Usually, that's what I usually do. I just kind of don't worry about it that much. It's going to fill in the space with that knot, so it won't leave a gap. And the rest of your stitches will help hold it together. Okay, so I'm going to go to the end and I'll show you how I end. Okay, so I'm at the end here. Here's the V-stitch and here's the V-stitch. I've gone into the top of this V-stitch and I've gone into the top of this V-stitch. Now, if I was going to continue to add more and more and more blocks on, I'd only finish half of my 2 chain stitch space. There's the one and there's the other. Okay, and that's where I would stop it, because I'm going to continue to add on this way more blocks. I want to leave the double crochet post of that V-stitch and one of these floating chain stitches, because there's 2 chain stitches for the V. So this is how I would end it if I'm going to continue to add on. Okay, so I want to show you how the end looks for the outside edge and how the end looks for the inside edge. I have the spoke of the V's unstitched, and I have 1/2 of the 2 chains, floating chains, stitched. These 2 are stitched, but these 2 are not. So this is so I can add that next block in and do the crisscross. And this is the all the way to the outside of the V. This is the V stitch and this is the V stitch, and I stitch them across up to that. So here is my starting end, and I'm going to finish off these corners and then go back in. So let's go ahead and put it together like we were stitching before. Here's the end of the V, the floating chain stitch, and here is the other floating chain stitch. And here's the top of the double crochet on that end of the V, and here's the top of the double crochet on that end of the V. So now it's to those ends. Now we're going to just hide the ends in here. And if you've done any crochet, you know how to hide these ends. Okay, and you do 3 times. And you make sure it's hooked on the edge of something, and then you just go back through. You don't have to go all the way to the outside edge. You can stop a couple of stitches before you hit that edge, and then into the last pass. And there's my little bit. So here you go. 2 outside edges. And I will have to do a little blocking on this. But I hope you enjoyed that. Please like, share, and subscribe, and crochet your way today, because it's the only time we have. What else are you going to do with your time? I'll see you next time.